Hi, everybody. Welcome to class this morning, to half and half, which I sometimes call whole and none when I'm here by myself. And I'm here by myself today. So Scott is out doing a bike race, doing the horribly hilly hundreds, which if you're local, maybe you know what that is. It's all around Blue Mounds. And it's very hilly out here in Blue Mounds. So it's all these like crazy climbs, and they go up to the top of the state park to finish it. So he's out doing that in really hot, humid weather, but he seems excited about it. So he gets to go do that, and I get to do this class, which sounds way better to me. So we each got our own fun morning. Um, so today, I put in the chat looking at getting the chest to open up and how that connects to the upper abdominals. And I was thinking there was a class a couple months back where Scott was talking about the upper abdominal connection and the breath. And that's a really similar idea, right? That having the upper abdominals engage and connect and being able to take a full inhale and letting the chest move, letting the rib cage move without moving down here in this lower part of the rib cage, well, that's also opening the chest from a really internal perspective. So when I think about the chest, um, I might start with thinking about the sternum bone, which is this breastbone right here in the center, and you can probably feel that on your body. That doesn't really have much muscular connection to it. So you just can feel right on that bone there. And then the major muscles, pectoralis major muscles, are right here from the sternum all the way out to the shoulder, the humerus bone. That's a really big muscle. Most of us know what that is. We can see it externally, especially on men, a little more easily sometimes than on women. And that muscle has three parts, is often thought about in three parts, this upper, middle, and lower part of the pec. And there's different ways to open those three sections of the pec major muscle. So sometimes we get really caught in one way of opening it, and we miss out on the mid and the lower. A lot of times what we kind of get is the upper one to open a little bit. So that's one thing to think about. Underneath the pec major muscle is a muscle called the pec minor. It's kind of a small muscle, and it goes up from basically the top of the shoulder, sort of around the shoulder, to down in the ribs. And it sits underneath that pec major muscle. It's a little harder to get to, but often is kind of tight, and it will be a part of that rounded shoulder action that happens to so many of us. That when that muscle gets tight, it kind of pulls the whole shoulder girdle forward that way. So it's a good one to get to in opening the chest to bring the shoulders back into place. And then we also have the layer of muscles that are the intercostal muscles that connect each rib, all the ribs together. So they're a little more internal inside the rib cage and also kind of like in the middle, like rib to rib in between all the ribs. And those are muscles that are connected to breathing, that as I inhale and exhale, they maybe have some assistance in moving the ribs, but it's also thought that they maintain your posture, that as your rib cage is changing size and moving around, changing its kind of relationship, and the lungs are changing their volume, that these muscles come on to just kind of maintain and stabilize within the posture while you're breathing. So that's really helpful, right? So, and then of course we get into lungs, and then we get into heart, right? And that's all could be part of the chest, and as we think about opening the chest. So just to give you kind of a picture of that and to think about it a little differently, it's not one muscle. I think a lot of times we think like, oh, I need to stretch this one muscle that opens my chest. It's kind of a lot involved. So we're gonna work with the ribs, the lower ribs, the upper abdominal connection. We're gonna work with the breath. And then we're also going to move the arm around into different positions to hit different parts of that pec major muscle, to think a little differently about how we're breathing in these movements, and to let the chest have its own very specific way of opening, like hitting all the little constituent parts that way. So let's start on your back. Knees bent. And feet flat. And then take your hands onto the lower part of the ribs. And we'll start with just easy breathing through the ribs. Right on that lower part of the rib cage, and how those bones move with your inhale and exhale. Pretty gentle. Think medium-sized breath. And small breath would be okay too. And as you do it for a little bit longer, you start with just what's the natural movement. You start to feel that. Once you start to feel what you're naturally doing, and you get a real sense of that, well, then you can adjust, then you can direct. So then you think, well, maybe my ribs could go a little more sideways with the inhale and drawn towards each other on the exhale. Or maybe I could let the back of the ribs open a little more with the inhale. See if you can imagine a 360 degrees around movement in the ribs, but a little extra emphasis on side movement. As you inhale and exhale, side body movement. And then step 3, see if in this movement here, pay attention to the muscles around your chest, to the feeling around your collarbones and upper ribs. And as you're breathing and directing your inhale, exhale into your lower ribs, what happens if you imagine your chest relaxing, softening, especially with the exhale? So inhale, side ribs open. Exhale, low ribs come together in the front. And the upper ribs, the chest, relaxes, softens, even elongates a little bit. And then taking your arms up to the ceiling. And same thing, feeling the ribs expand sideways with your inhale, feeling them draw together in the front with your exhale, softening the chest with the arms reaching up towards the ceiling. And then next time you exhale, start to float the arms up overhead. Keep the lower ribs dropping. Notice how the chest softens, lengthens, all those muscles, letting go, elongate a little bit to reach the arms back. And then arms back up to the ceiling. and reset the whole thing. Exhale. Find your lower ribs. Float your arms back overhead and allowing the chest to get longer. Arms come back to the ceiling and reset. A couple more times like that. Breathing in, moving on the exhale. Observing your chest. And back up. Last one. And relax for a second. So we're going to do that same thing again, adding in one more thing. So this time, as your arms get overhead, I'll just do one arm so you can see me a little better. As your arms get overhead, we're going to leave it there and then try the breath in this position, right? So in this position here with the arm back overhead, my fingers aren't touching the floor. I'm still holding them up a little. Breathing wide through the lower ribs. Exhale, drawing your ribs in even a little bit more. And I keep talking about making the chest a little longer. So I'm thinking from sort of here to here, right? Like there's some length that happens from the lower rib all the way through that pec muscle, through both pec major and minor, to create a little more length. So arms reach overhead to start towards the ceiling. And start the same inhale. And as you exhale, floating back, low ribs coming together, chest getting longer. And then stay here for a full breath cycle. Inhale, exhale, low ribs draw in just a little more, chest lengthens just a little more, arms reach just a little more. And then back up. So we'll do a couple like that. And not so much that hurts or strains, right? See if you can feel the length happening from a pretty internal level, from this space, not just from your arm reaching. And one more time. And once you get back to the ceiling again, this time, relax your arms, relax everything down. Take a couple breaths. Notice what your breath is like. For me, my breath just got naturally fuller and fuller. I started taking bigger breaths, not because I thought I need to take bigger breaths, but just because things started opening up. So what's it like for you now? How's the breath moving through your chest? How's it moving through the lower ribs? And then let's do just a little bit for the lower abdominals to bring those online. That's going to help support what goes on in the upper body. So we'll shift our focus just a bit to the pelvis and feeling the pelvis really relaxed and heavy. And then let's go into some knee folds, really simple. Inhale, one knee floats in, and exhale, take it back down. So as you inhale and exhale, you can still feel that wide rib feeling with the breath, drawing the ribs together, the low ribs together with your exhale. Also the low belly working with the exhale. One more each side, alternating one leg up. Inhale, lower exhale, finishing up this set. With both feet on the floor, let's take your arms back up to the ceiling. Palms face your thighs, palms face forward. And in this position here, sometimes if I reach really, really far, tightens my chest, narrows my chest. Sometimes if I get too sort of relaxed in my shoulders, it actually pops my low ribs up a little bit. So somewhere in between, I have a little energy that widens my shoulder blades, that lifts my shoulders just a tiny bit off the floor so I can connect the lower ribs, but still pretty soft feeling in my chest, pretty wide, soft feeling in my chest. And then see if you can keep that feeling as you bring your head up for the 100. Exhaling, rolling up, looking in towards your belly. Again, same thing. My shoulders aren't perfectly down. My blades are wide. They come just a little forward to help me up, but not so forward that they tighten up in my chest. Yeah. And then let's go into the 100 here. You can have your feet down or up as you go. And exhale. And notice some of those same things. Wide rib inhale, soft chest exhale. Deep belly exhale. Now you can always do this with one hand behind your head, helping to hold your head up. You could also do it with your head down, noticing full breath movement and still support from upper abdominals from belly. 3 more times. And last one. And then rest everything down. And then however you like, bring yourself up to sitting. Okay, so as we started, I put in the chat to grab a strap, but that I forgot to remind you at the beginning. So go grab a strap or a little kitchen towel if you didn't get that. You can hit pause on this, come back and hit play, and YouTube Live will just pick right back up where you were. So we're going to use your strap. Go ahead and come up to standing. And once you're up to standing, if you have a strap, you're going to double it over so it's not quite so long. And then we're going to work with this idea, same idea that we had on the floor. Ribs connected in the front, long sense of the chest, that kind of long feeling in the chest. We'll do a little bit for all of those pec major muscles and a little bit for the pec minor muscles. So I talked about all those muscles. As my arm reaches overhead, if I think of that length through the chest while keeping the ribs engaged, the shoulders float up just a little bit, and I have that nice image from the ribs to the shoulders. So we're going to work with that with the strap here. So holding out a little wider than your shoulders, elbows a little soft. Exhale, soft chest, ribs together. Now, as you do that, soft chest, ribs together, maybe the shoulders come forward a little bit, right? So you could play with the shoulders floating a tiny bit back. And what's the balance? Like, where is too far as the shoulders come back? Where's the moment where the chest starts to pull up again and the back starts to come forward, right? And I end up in no low rib connection here. So let's start all the way in the ribs connected, the chest really relaxed and soft, and then a little bit floating open in the shoulders, which lets the shoulders come a little back, but still wide in the shoulder blades, still connected in the ribs here. And then in that space, inhale, pull the strap. Exhale, release it. Inhale, pull the strap. Exhale, release it. All the time I talk about using your triceps in this exercise. And that's partly so that it doesn't become overly about your chest grabbing. If I add in some work in the triceps, there's potential for my chest to broaden and not grip. Two more. And then pulling out and hold that. And now we go into that long chest feeling. Inhale to about shoulder height. Exhale, find the long chest. Ribs keep dropping. Inhale, shoulder height. Exhale, bend your knees as you lower. And inhale up. Exhale overhead. Ribs sink, chest gets longer. Back to neutral. Two more. And lower down. And then release all that. Okay, so notice I've never really talked about stretching your chest at this point. You might feel a stretch in some of these. You might actually feel more of the upper abdominal connection. You might feel, I'm feeling just a lot of breath and ease in the breath. All of those are good. So sometimes we think, open the chest, I have to stretch. It doesn't always work exactly like that. Sometimes it's just getting it moving. And as it contracts more, it releases more. As the breath moves more, it just gets warmer and it feels more open and more mobile. So let's get a little bit into some of those intercostal muscles I was talking about, and we'll do that through side bending. So the intercostal muscles are the muscles that connect rib to rib. So each rib, you've got 3 sets of muscles, of intercostals that are connect all those ribs together. So they're pretty subtle. It's not very easy to feel them. You can't really touch them, right? But those have a little bit of, they can get more spaced out rib to rib, but they can get more drawn together rib to rib. So as we go into side bending, that long chest feeling, and then also opening in between each rib over to the side. So we're going to do that with the strap. Have my legs a little open. You can take your legs a little open. Find your long chest position, ribs connected, low ribs connected in the front. And then inhale. Imagine all the side ribs opening, a little more space there. And can you feel that side of the chest feels like it gets a little longer, that whole armpit gets longer. And then back to center. So as you go over to the left, right ribs open up, right side of the chest lengthens a little more even. And exhale back to center. Inhale. And exhale center. And inhale. And Exhale, center. I have a little bit of work happening in my lower abdominals. And that's supporting me opening all the other stuff. You need a good foundation to create more mobility. And one more each side. And lower everything down. And circle your shoulders around a little bit. So what I find is when my ribs open up a little more, it opens up the kind of adhesions between my shoulder girdle and my rib cage, right? That those two things can feel separated. So as I get the ribs to open a little more, it makes my shoulders feel a little more movable, which is nice. Okay, we're going to just take the strap behind you. We're going to take a little different movement. We haven't been doing shoulder extension. We've been doing shoulder flexion over and over again. It's one way to open the chest. We're going to take shoulder extension, which is when you take the arm behind you. So earlier we came up to standing. I said ribs in, soft chest. That brings the shoulders a little forward. A little tiny bit. Let the shoulders get broader and open. And then reaching your arms back behind you. Now in this particular way of moving, we're going to focus on the mid and lower part of that pec major, which means I want to make sure my arms feel kind of turned in, which is counterintuitive. We often think, turn them out. I'm going to let them roll in a little bit, and that gets that lower part of the pec. So thumbs go back more than pinkies. Thumbs reach back behind you. Shoulders feel like they turn in a little bit. And that gets into my mid and lower pec major muscle. And then back down. And I'll say this in like 4 or 5 different ways. But let's start with this. The thumb reaching back more than the pinky. Armpit side of the arm reaching back. Really relaxed chest. Ribs together in the front. Bring it in. And reaching back. And exhale in. And inhale back. And exhale, bring it back in. I got some triceps going for sure too, and upper back of the shoulder muscles working. And I also think of my elbow pits facing each other as I go, right? Not turning them forward. And a couple more. Last one. And then relax everything again. Shake it all out. Sometimes my forearms start to grab and I feel really tight in my hands. So this movement I find is so tricky for people because we're so used to, as I was saying before, opening that upper portion of the pec muscle, that highest portion of the pec. And in order to do that, it's more likely that we would rotate the arm open, the shoulder open, and maybe pull the blades together. That doesn't get to these lower ones. And functionally, it doesn't actually create the movement of shoulder extension as easily. It's a slightly different movement. So this actual shoulder extension movement happens best when the arm has an internal rotation. Now, what's tricky is that we decided not to round the shoulder forward, and sometimes internally spiraling the arm feels like rolling the shoulder forward. It's a very subtle distinction. So here I am, ribs are connected, chest is soft. A little bit the shoulder opens by moving back slightly, but not by rotating back, right? So I can move the shoulder back slightly, or I can rotate the whole arm open. And so what's really tricky is I'm going to move the shoulder back slightly, And then as my arm goes back, I'm still going to be rotating in. It's not way forward. It's just spiraled in. Yeah? Play with that a little for yourself. I often like to just use my hand to remind myself what direction I want to go. And like I said, I talked about armpit back, thumb side back, inner elbows pointing towards each other. Maybe all those are useful for you. Also, not squeezing the blades together, right? Not sending my chest forward, all that stuff. When you get it, it's often a smaller range of motion. You don't take your arm as far. And after you do it a couple times, or a few times, or you get a little more used to it, you actually get a lot of really deep, intense work. You can feel that releasing in the chest, that potential to feel that. And then I also get a lot of tricep and the very upper back of the shoulder, the back of the deltoid and the rotator cuff muscles. Just kind of got to find that sweet spot a couple times back and forth. Less is more. But when you first start doing it, it feels like less is less. So first you do less is less. I don't feel as much. I'm not going as far. And then it starts to very slowly become less is more. And then you go, oh, less is way more. And you can really start to feel things. And one more. And then release all that. Okay. Whew. Seems like a lot. So let's work our way back to the floor. And let's play a little bit with sun salutation to do it, which is going to really, it gets all these motions in the chest as we go. So standing towards the front of your mat, feet in parallel, ribs are nicely connected, long chest, and then lift that long chest up. Exhale, rolling forward through your spine, all the way down, knees bend, arms to the floor. Lengthen the spine out. And exhale, hands to the floor. Here's that long chest again to go to downward dog. So your feet step back, link through the chest, ribs drawing together. Now practice the breath that we've been working on. Wide rib inhale, soft long chest exhale. And hanging out here a couple breaths. And then coming forward, look to your hands. Step your feet forward. Gorilla, reaching out. Exhale. And then coming back up. Ribs together in the front, long chest to reach. And arms down. And let's take 2 more of those, just to feel all that movement. Bend your knees as you come forward. Feel the spine lengthen. And hands to the floor, stepping back. Downward dog. Practicing the breath, observing the chest. Lower ribs, really important on the exhale for this one, I think. And then coming back forward. And gorilla reach out. Exhale, fold. And then coming up. And last time. And lengthening out, gorilla. And stepping back, down dog. And a couple breaths here. And then coming down to hands and knees. Okay, so feeling a little more open, feeling the breath moving a little more, hopefully. Let's do a little bit of motion in the opposite direction, which one is just nice to do to vary the motion back and forth. Just kind of makes everything a little more lubed up and movable. But I think it's also really good to test the opposite motion, right? What's the difference between softly allowing the chest to curve and tightening and rounding and pulling the chest forward, right? Those are different things. So how do we practice letting the chest soften and curve without necessarily grabbing in the chest and pulling the shoulders forward to do it? How do we keep openness even when we're not at the fullest point of openness? So I'm going to take one leg forward. You can take right leg forward if you're mirroring me, left knee bent, and holding the back of the leg. So you know this one. Tipping back to the back of your pelvis. Draw your lower abdominals into support, and then feel what it's like. If you pull on your leg, let your biceps come on a little bit, probably your chest came on. And then feel what happens when you go too far and you keep pulling and your blades come together and your chest gets really tight and your elbows pull in. Feel that place. That's not the place we want. Find the lower rib connection, the soft rounded chest, the elbows out wide. Now breathe through the back ribs, side ribs. And exhale. Find the low belly, low ribs in the front, chest soft. I'm definitely holding and working with my arms, but it's a really different quality, right? Just enough work, no extra. Now let's start the tipping back. Inhale. And however far you want to go, if you want to pause halfway, just hold it there. Or you could go all the way down to the mat. Inhale and exhale. Back up. So I'm going to show that halfway version again. Inhaling, rolling back. Exhale, hold it. And then stay here for another inhale. And exhale. Coming up. And then let's do two more. I'm going to do the full version this time. You can do either one. Inhale, rolling back. Exhale to the floor. And inhale, coming up. Exhale. All the way back where you started. And one more time. And then all the way up to sitting and switch legs. Okay, so can you feel what happens like at different points as the movement gets a little more stressful? Your chest comes on, your elbows pull in, your neck grabs, all those things. It happens to me. I can feel the tendency to want to do that. I bet it happens to you. So that's okay. You're observing and you're adjusting and refining. It may not be perfect, but you're just going to keep working with this idea. So same thing. Let's do the same thing. Pull a little too far, pull the elbows in, feel what that's like. And then soften, belly, ribs, easy soft chest. Pull it a little too far, and then find where you want to go. Now, you could go too far the other direction too, right? I could go too far back and that would also be tight. So it is that kind of Goldilocks space. And then back and forth, either halfway down or all the way down, or a couple of both. Inhaling and exhaling. And then to come up, inhale and exhale back where you started. And again. And back, side ribs open on the inhale. And soft chest support on the exhale. Last one. Okay, let's go back onto your back. And then arms up to the ceiling, just like we did before the 100. Feel that shoulder position, soft chest, wide back, shoulders tiny bit off the floor. And then float your hands down to the floor and feel all those same things, soft chest, wide back, and shoulders not totally collapsed in the floor. Shoulders just a little off the floor. Not so much that you grip, but enough that your ribs come in really nicely and your back can stay wide. Okay, so here's our chance to practice our more neutral posture. You can still have an open chest with the breath in your just neutral standing posture. So we're going to take one leg in. You can take the left leg in up towards the ceiling. Now holding the leg up, do a couple breaths. Wide ribs, inhale. Soft chest, ribs and belly, exhale. And then keeping all that with the leg circles. Inhale across the body to the right, exhale, around and back up to center. And just observe how things are working, everything you've been working on with the class. What's it like in this exercise? And then reverse the direction. Same thing. Last one. And rest everything down for a moment. So for me, I was noticing lots of stuff, but the work we did with the strap behind your back, and then we were talking about that position of letting the shoulder feel slightly internally rotated. We got these tricep muscles to come on. I was reminded of that as I was doing this, just a little bit of that feeling again. That's how I felt connected through there. You may have felt that, you may have felt something different, but that was mine. So let's take the other leg in, and maybe it'll be totally different on this side. Taking the right leg up, Take a couple breaths, just holding your leg in place. It's actually maybe one of the hardest parts of the exercise right here. And then we start a little movement over to the left. Exhale around and up. Take the reverse. Last one. And then resting everything down. Take a couple breaths again. Arms however you like them. And then bring yourself up to sitting. Okay, so let's see what it's like to do a little bit of twisting. Also a really nice way to get into the chest, and a kind of a complicated way to get into the chest, right? So I talked about those 3 upper, middle, lower pec muscles. So once I start to rotate, you can imagine like the threads of a screw, right? Going down a little lower. You could almost imagine your muscle like that, right? Like the first thread, the second thread, the third thread, and then it gets down into obliques and other things as you go, right? So we get that kind of twisting, lengthening, and opening. It's very different than this kind of lengthening and opening. So sitting up, maybe your legs are crossed. Maybe you're sitting in a chair. Maybe you're sitting on a blanket. All of that would be fine. It's totally a great way to sit. Don't be distracted by your hips, right? Like if this is super tight in your hips, go grab a little stool or a chair or something. It'll work a little better. So a couple breaths here. In this position here, can you feel that wide rib position? Exhale, drawing together in the front. And then we start with the head and neck. And then just one rib at a time. See if you could imagine one rib at a time moving around the corner. You get that real spiraled position. I'm not pulling a lot with my shoulders. I'm really thinking about the ribs moving. I'm going to take this opposite hand, left hand to right knee. And a couple breaths here. Imagining the breath moving all through the ribs in this position. It's not just the right side of my chest. And then back to center. Exhale. A little bit of support here. Head, neck, and then just the image. Top rib, second rib, spirally rotation in the chest muscles there. Twisty length. Right hand moves to the left knee, looking over your left shoulder. And then breathing. And feeling how the breath moves all around the chest, back ribs, side ribs. And then back to center. Okay, we're going to do each side one more time. You can stay just like you are. If you're cross-legged and you want just a little extra challenge, you could take the other leg in front, switch the legs. Sometimes that just feels super awkward, and so that's fine if you leave the legs like they are. Same thing. Find your support, starting from the top, working through the vertebra, and imagining each rib gets a little bit of movement, like each thread of the screw, all the way down through the lower ribs. Lower abdominals give you the foundation support. So a little bit of support there. Back to center. Breathing in. Exhale, a little support. And then working your way to the left. Feeling the breath moving through the ribs in the twist. And coming back to center. And let's come to your back one more time, just like we started. Lying on your back, knees bent, feet flat. And then little mini Shavasana relaxation here. And a lot of times I think people are tempted to be like, oh, I'm done, I'm going to go on to the next thing. Sometimes people don't really like this part of it. Like they just start, their mind just starts going crazy. And all of that is just totally normal and maybe just fine. It may be the way you work. But the logic behind doing this little bit of rest, even a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, is giving the body just a little time to integrate everything you just did, right? You don't have to be relaxed. You might not be relaxed. You don't even have to be awake. You might fall asleep. You might not listen to me at all. But you take a moment in stillness. You allow everything to settle. And there's just that little bit of processing time. Because we're trying to work on these very ingrained habits, right? So doing it for an hour is nice, but maybe you go back to that old habit. So we do it for an hour about. We take a moment, let the nervous system process, let the body settle into this place and integrate. And then we move on. See if it holds just a little better. It seems to be really helpful. So here you are on your back, focusing on the breath, allowing your body to just settle as best you can, not getting too distracted by other things, not moving on to the next thing in your day just yet. And observing without judging things in your body. It's good or bad, it's just letting it do its thing. Like if you were teaching a little kid to write, you wouldn't spend a lot of time judging that little kid. You would just say, hey, you got the pencil on the paper. Good job, right? You made a mark. And you let that little kid start to figure out with time and space how to make an actual letter. And we'll spend just another minute here, breathing, observing. Letting things settle into your body. And then opening your eyes. And then however you like, moving back to sitting. Okay, thank you so much for being here today. Scott will be back with us next week, I do believe, I think, unless he doesn't make it through the horribly hilly, but I think he will. I think he'll make it back. Last week we mentioned Scott and I are putting together some themes for the semester, and we said anything you're interested in, any classes that you think, oh, I'd like to go back and revisit that, or things we haven't covered you might be interested in. So again, as we're starting to put those together, type into the chat if there's anything that you'd like us to cover, and we'll think about that as we're putting things together for the upcoming fall. Otherwise, hope you're doing well. Thanks for being with us today. Have a good Labor Day next weekend. We will be here teaching, and so yeah, maybe take us with you on whatever you do this Labor Day. So that's all. Bye.